Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on the time you're watching this video. For today, we're going to present an in-depth English book analysis. Are they selling what they claim? So, about the authors. Fabiola Martinez Guerrero holds a bachelor's in Culture and Arts by the University of Guanajuato. Silvia Montserrat Pacheco Constantino holds a BA in English Language by the University of Quintana Roo. Rosie Michelle Peña Chan holds a bachelor's degree in English Language by the University of Quintana Roo, and Valeria Marquez Arellano holds a BA degree in ELT by the University of Guanajuato. All of the authors are currently studying a master's degree in Applied Linguistics in ELT. So for today, we're going to talk about some concepts in the LIF review, summary of findings, discussion of findings, and a conclusion. So first we have Michelle presenting the LIF review.
Thank you, Valeria. As she mentioned, I'm going to talk about the literature review, and I'm going to start with the role of material in teaching. In the area of education, materials play an essential role. Inside the classroom, they function as a supportive resources for both teachers and learners. In the area of English language teaching, materials include different options such as book, flashcards, worksheets, audiovisual materials, just to mention a few. There are some authors such as Mukundan and Nimechil Selim who claim that the textbook is one of the crucial factors in determining the learner's success in language courses. And we as professors know that the use of these materials is vital guidance for our students. However, using materials does not mean that they will always be sufficient for learners' needs and their proper learning development. Next slide, please. What is material evaluation? Materials evaluation is a procedure that involves measuring the value of a set of learning materials. Choosing a course book can be extremely difficult. When selecting a textbook, the teachers can be overwhelmed by choosing the right one and the most appropriate one. We cannot get a good picture of the suitability of a book until we have been working through it for some time. To evaluate materials, some authors such as Coningsworth, Sheldon, Williams, Robdy, and Littlejohn have proposed different frameworks and checklists that textbooks and materials need to cover to be considered as adequate for the classroom and students' proper development. For example, let's talk about Robdy. His criteria suggest that teaching materials should be selected according to the context in which educators will develop their teaching and considering the interests and needs of both students and teachers. Next slide, please. But for this specific evaluation of material, we decided to use Littlejohn 2011 evaluation criteria because it involves a more in-depth evaluation compared to other authors. The author mentions different aspects to consider when evaluating materials, such as price and quality. He also suggests more detailed characteristics such as pedagogy, methodology, and the content of the analyzed material. Littlejohn describes his checklist as a framework which draws extensively in an attempt to provide the basis for a more comprehensive listing of aspects which from a pedagogical viewpoint need to be taken into account when analyzing materials. And here we have this chart in which Littlejohn includes what is there, what is required, and what is implied. What is there? This level involves the publication date, the intended audience, the type of material, the amount of classroom time required, and how the materials are to be used. In the second level, we have the what is required. Here we need to draw deductions about what exactly teachers and learners using the materials will have to do, to divide the materials into their constituent tasks, and then to analyze each case in turn. And for the level 3, this level draws on findings at levels 1 and 2 to come to some general conclusions about the apparent underlying principles of the materials.
Thank you, Mitch. So for the summary of findings, we have Monse.
Yes, thank you, Valo. This picture illustrates the summary of the findings and the way we will present it on this presentation. First, we have, as Michelle mentioned on the literature review, the stage one, which is what is there. We will describe the book in a general way. Then we will talk about the type of syllabus, and finally the approach in the language classroom. Then for stage two, we will discuss what is required in 3 different levels. Level 1, what is the learner expected to do? Level 2, who with? Level 3, with what content? And finally for stage 3, what is implied? Okay, so with what content in this level, we will discuss first the findings and then well, not the conclusions, but in somehow a way we relate the information that we found with the theory that was presented. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, first we have the stage one, which is what is there. To answer this question, we provide the general description of the book, the type of syllabus, and approach in the language classroom, which Valo will help me to talk a little bit about this stage.
Thank you, Monse. So in this case, this is a series of books that covers levels A1 to B1 according to the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. This book contains 6 different units, and it has the student book and the workbook within the same book. Each unit focuses on a different topic, and therefore the book has a topical syllabus. In the case of this book, it was used in a language center, and this was designed for students that were teenagers. This language center claims to focus on a communicative language teaching approach to provide students with communicative competences that include knowing how to use, vary, produce, and maintain communication among speakers and settings. Once students finish with this program, they can begin in the adults program at an upper intermediate level. So for the second stage, the what is required, Monse will help me, please.
Yes. Just I want to go back a little bit and regarding the type of the syllabus and the approach in the language classroom. The type of syllabus that we found that the school where we conducted the study implemented was the topical syllabus. And this type of syllabus focuses on each unit focuses on a different topic. And then the approach in the language classroom, we found that the approach that they use was the communicative approach, language approach. We wanted to emphasize this because on the conclusions, we relate how the book was presented or what they try to sell to the learners, and if they actually implement it in the classroom, and if they follow the approach and the syllabus that was stated. So having said that, now I will discuss the stage 2, which is what is required. Next slide, please. As we recall, this stage aimed to conduct a subjective analysis, and this literally means and tries to answer what exactly the teachers and the learners who use the material are required to do. This is divided in 3 levels. In level 1, so it's what is the learner expected to do. We found that for turn take, they are mostly required to not to initiate the conversation or the activities, but to respond them. And even the majority of the time, they are not required even to have a participation or to have a turn take perspective. For the focus on activities, shows that these have relationships between meaning and system, but the activities try to be focused on a social and a psychological and hypothetical way. For example, for a language system, we found 100 activities that were focused on this type of purpose. Then for meaning, 120 activities. For meaning system relationship, what I mentioned is 151. So they are, the majority of the activities try to convey a message that comes from a hypothetical or social psychological purpose. And then for the mental operation, they retrieve from memory, build text, draw on prior knowledge, compare, decode semantic meaning, deduce language rule, and apply language rule, which this last one is the one we found with the most number of activities. Now, next slide, please. The second level, who with. So if we recall the book and the approach that they try to use is communicative. However, the learners are required to work individually the majority of the time in the activities. It's limited the time where they are asked to work in pairs or in groups, which means that it involves a limited interaction between learners. And then the 90 activities focus on or try to combine. So try to combine these all four together. The next stage, please. Okay, and level 3 with what context? In here we can have the form, the source, and the nature. The form means the input to learners and the expected output from learners. In this case, we found that the majority of the activities included a written words or phrases only. They don't involve sounds or music, this sensitive characteristics. They don't include it on the majority of activities, but they do have a lot of written expressions, written words, and limited extended discourse. So they're just limited to words or phrases. They do use graphics to try to make the book appealing or the activities appealing to the learners, but the oral production, it's also limited. Then for the expected output, what they want, meaning what the learners want to produce, they do have oral expressions, but it's only words or phrases. And again, we fall into the written words or phrases, not a extended discourse. And that is, we only found one activity in this unit that it was in the book, that it was for a written discourse, extended discourse. Then for the source, which means that the main source of information was from learners, was from the book. So the information, the source information in which the learners are working or the learners are working with is basically from the book. And the teacher can implement some ideas, but I mean, this is fundamental in a book. But if we base our teaching just in what we and the activities that are included, then are limited just to what is presented in there. And finally, for nature, we have in here that metalinguistic comments, source comment on language use, the structure of that the activities are focused on structure and form and meaning, but most of the activities refer to their sources from grammatical rules instead of trying to involve the learners in to go further rather than just grammatical sources. Next slide, please. Okay, so for stage 2, we mentioned the findings, the results. But now for stage 3, this is the, well, I wouldn't say the most enriching part of this analysis, but it is relevant because we relating here. So what does this mean? What do we find? What we really find and can be applicable in the classroom. Okay, next slide. So in this case, for output, well, I will present it first, the input and output, then the expectations of the book, the interaction, the sources of information on the topics, and the activities in general. To start with, the input and output, it was found that, well, half of the activities, almost half of the activities of input and 60% of the output refers to written words or phrases, as I mentioned. So the higher expected output for the book is that the learners are able to write, but not to write a significant discourse or extended discourse. They will just be required to write words and phrases to fill in the blank, or to identify words. The writing productive skills are required the most, rather than speaking or listening. And when they are required to talk or participate, they are limited also just to words or phrases, which is not so much likely to happen in a communicative. We have to remember that they claim that they were implementing a communicative approach, and just by repeating a word, that doesn't mean that they will communicate. And then finally, for the developing written words, they, as I mentioned, it's written forms rather than communication itself. So even though they are capable of expressing themselves, and if they develop, by using this series of books, they develop the ability to write, it will be limited when they come to communicate with other people. The next slide will present the expectations promoted by the book, how the book promote itself, the education. Well, the results show that the expectations were developing the 4 skills equally, but that does not happen because, as the results show, they they just limited the expectations to written forms. So perhaps they can develop the 4 skills equally. The book may not convey it. It does not mean, of course, it does not mean that the pupils will not be able to communicate in real life. We are not implying this. But it might be more complicated for them to produce orally within the language. Okay, and it was basically that it did not match completely how the book is promoted or what the book implies and sells. The next slide will show the results regarding interaction. So in this case, in interaction, the majority of the activities demand individual work. So almost half of it, 46.9% of the time. And when learners actually get to work in pairs or group, it's not to practice communicative language at all. Okay, they just produce commands, but these commands are already stated by the teacher or are stated on the book. So they are actually not producing a command on their own. Also, they are conscious that the learners, we are conscious as researchers that the learners' interaction and their personality might affect their attitude towards working with other classmates, and we cannot have 100% the attention of them, but maybe include an extra variety of activities besides the ones that are promoted by the book will help to develop their interaction in the classroom and to have a better environment. The next slide, please. Okay, so regarding the sources of information and the topics that were covered, the results show that the book was the main source of information, that the class perhaps might be planned based on the book, and we were worried about the fact that until this day that we are going through or in the middle of a pandemic, we have the idea of working only with the book. And we as teachers are never ready for this type of challenges and everyday challenges. But imagine now being used to plan your class being based on the book, and now that you have to implement new ideas and new ways of working, then this could work as a disadvantage. Then the students' interest might not lead towards the content. Some of the books, well, and this book especially uses topics that might not be interested for them. We know that technology is now the hot topic nowadays, and this book does not include some of them, the topics that learners might be interested. They do include cross-cultural topics, but we don't consider that they are appealing for learners. Most of them could be more attractive. We could implement more activities, and perhaps editors need to take into consideration that learners' interests may vary depending on the generation, depending on the context, and this is not applicable only for this book. In general, as teachers, we have noticed that we need to be more aware of that. For educators' perspective, we need to bring and to be aware of our students' needs, of our students' interests, and this book limited. We found that it limited the students' needs, or it does not take into consideration that aspect. And finally, the next slide will show the activities. So regarding the activities, we consider that they might not be useful, the vocabulary might not be useful for them. They were a large number of fill-in activities, and according to our experience, not only as researchers, but as teachers in the classroom, we can notice that these fill-in activities are not significant, do not bring a significant experience for learners, and maybe a variety of different activities should be included. As I've been mentioning, the students might not need to communicate, might not need to communicate out the classroom to maintain a conversation, right? But if they are not practicing in the classroom, it's the possibility of them communicating outside is even more limited. We are not preparing them for the future. We're just giving them this book to fill in activities with grammatical structures, a lot of grammar. But in the end, when you go outside, we consider that grammar, it is important to convey a message, but sometimes it's not what all of the students require, it's not what all students need. And also learners are encouraged to practice these structures, but they are not actively involved. It's not meaningful. It's not meaningful for us to have our students with this vocabulary that it's not related to their needs, it's not related to what they like or dislike, and they just have to fill in these spaces, and it's not meaningful at all. They're not connecting, they're not making these connections to have a meaningful learning experience. And then next we have the discussion. Now, apart from this, what we found, the result, how we connected to the description of the book, to the curriculum. Now we have the development of the language skills, what the book solved, and what it really means. So this will be presented by Fabiola.
Okay, thank you so much, Monse. Well, in addition, and to enhance the letter, the claims previously stated by Monse, I'm going to discuss now what we found in the book regarding the development of the 4 language skills. So next slide, please. Okay, well, regarding the 4 skills, the results found in the book show the following. Next. Okay, thank you. I'll start by the skill of reading. Okay, what we found regarding reading is that the tasks were related to activities such as read and act, read and answer or feel. It was read and complete, read and find. So we consider that these activities are not precisely focused on reading comprehension. However, at the end of each unit, readings related to the culture of different countries were featured. So this would back up the claim that the book made about featuring variety of texts and also the approach they have to culture through readings. However, as I mentioned in the first point, the activities do not reflect comprehension. The book does not claim to focus on reading comprehension. I think that in this sense, the book might not be deceiving, but I do consider that these readings are not particularly focused on the comprehension, and they're not particularly appealing for the learner. And this connects to the following aspects that we found, because these activities are mostly focusing on assessing vocabulary. Other than that, we didn't find activities that were more meaningful than that, or that would encourage comprehension. So therefore, activities were mostly short and did not have a significant value for comprehension, as I already mentioned. So I think that also the fact that the readings were not matching the students' context might also affect on the way the students would perceive the readings. They could be not as appealing for them, but we do think, however, that it could be improved. These activities and the reading tasks, they could be improved by the intervention of the teacher, which is one of the features that the book does allow, and that the book does suggest, that it is flexible as one of the qualities of the book. So the teacher might have a saying in how to handle these activities, to adjust, to maybe make some modifications in order to make these activities probably more meaningful and with more impact or relevance within the context in which the book is being used. So next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so now regarding writing, well, the activities were also related about activities such as writing an email, maybe writing about yourself, or also activities such as filling the blanks, matching words, or these typical vocabulary exercises that we are all familiar with. So this is an important skill within the book, since most of the activities, since most of the lessons and units require writing activities. So learners are required to practice the skill, regardless if it's short or long in size. But we think that also the activities can be a little bit simple or superficial, because they do not reflect the real use of language. We think that the learners are required to write isolated vocabulary items, and as my peer Monse mentioned, this is not really focusing on a communicative approach. This is more like, well, isolated words. That does not reflect a real or authentic communication. If the learner would face a situation in which he or she would have to speak, knowing these isolated items might not be very helpful in those situations. However, it is required for the learner to work on grammar structures and forms. And this does connect with the claim of the book that they say that they cover grammatical areas that are appropriate for each level. So also we found that the book links both reading and writing skills, as I mentioned in the reading description. At the end of the unit, either if it's a reading or a writing activity, they're both connected, so they kind of complement each other. So this skill is practiced throughout the majority of activities. It can be found in every lesson in the book. And well, although writing is not sold as a main focus or approach from the book, we think that it is practiced in the majority of the activities. And also, I think that learners are not so much as they do not have such an active role regarding this, because they are expected, as I said, to write isolated items or just to fill out blanks. So that may give the learner more of a passive role regarding these activities. So as we mentioned before, this might not reflect real or authentic communication. It's not what they're going to find outside the classroom. That takes us to the following skill, which is listening. Next, please. Okay, so regarding listening activities, well, we found activities such as listen and write, listen and match. We thought that these activities do not necessarily target the skill in a deeper or strong way. We think that these are we would consider them more like superficial activities, because we think that like, you know, listen and check, listen and write, listen and repeat, or listen and match do not really reflect either real listening comprehension. Listening activities are found throughout the book as well, but these activities are not focused on speech. As we mentioned, they're just about listening and repeating, listening and matching. So we do not consider these activities to be related to listening comprehension. So they only tend to focus on vocabulary or identifying words or just simple repetition. And as we mentioned before, this might not represent real listening or the listening that they would also face in reality or in an authentic conversation. So there can be found 1 or 2 listening activities in each unit. And this is kind of contrasting compared to the writing and reading activities that can be found throughout the whole book. So we consider that even though it's obvious by now, the book does not follow a communicative approach. It does not mean that learners are not going to produce the language. It's just that they are going to produce language by repeating and not in a more authentic or communicative approach, which is what you would expect according to the claims of the book. And that takes me to the last skill that I'm going to discuss, which is speaking. So next slide, please. Okay, and regarding speaking, we only found 14 activities in the book. We also think that they do not reflect authentic communication. Some of these activities for speaking are telling your language, tell your partner, or tell your class. Activities such as telling time are some of the activities that we found for speaking. So as I've mentioned in the previous skills, the book only requires for learners to produce commands. And it gives no room for learners to produce language in a communicative way. So we consider that, okay, although what I just mentioned does not imply that learners will not be able to communicate at all, because they will, obviously, but we do consider that it makes it very difficult for learners to communicate on real life situations. I think that overall we concluded that the role of the learner on these activities is more of a passive role. We do consider, however, that the teacher might have a very relevant role by adjusting or adjusting or modifying activities in a way that they might give the learner more of an output, more of participation, more active role. And in that way, the learner might get more from the activities other than just superficial or isolated activities that do not reflect authentic or real language and real communication or communicative approach. That's what we concluded from these 4 skills that we found in the book. And now for the conclusions, I think that Valeria is next.
Thank you, Fabi. So yeah, for the conclusion, we analyzed 371 activities, and the analysis demonstrated that one of the principles of the Common European Framework is followed, since the activities included the 4 skills: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. However, learners do not play an active role when producing the language because of the content of the book, and as a result, the teacher has a crucial role, since activities need to be adapted and or depending, they need to be expanded by the teacher. This to provide students with more variety of input, and also for the development of interaction in the classroom. And as a result, students can become more proficient in the target language. So these are our references. And thank you very much. And thank you, Monse, Fabi, and Mitch for presenting this.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, guys.
Yes. Thank you for your attention, and we hope this information can get to more people, so we contribute to teaching and to learning.
We know that now there are difficult times, and we are very thankful for your time and for watching this video.
Okay, thank you.